Hey, good evening. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. Thank you for joining me today for a conversation with Connor Boyack. If this is your first time here, I hope you'll consider subscribing so you can be notified about new content, especially live shows like this one. And the goal of this show is to be a meeting place, a town hall of sorts where people who want to improve education come to hear ideas and share their own, a place where diversity of thought is not only welcome, but championed. With that goal in mind, I've invited Connor to talk to us about education freedom, education entrepreneurship, and alternatives to school as we know it, ways for your kids to succeed without school, perhaps. Now, without further ado, let's welcome Connor Boyack. He is the founder and president of Libertas Institute, an award-winning free market think tank. He was named one of Utah's most politically influential people by the Salt Lake Tribune, and his leadership has led to dozens of significant legislative victories spanning a wide range of areas such as privacy, government transparency, property rights, drug policy, education, personal freedom, and more. Quite an accomplishment. And he is best known for the Tuttle Twins books, which I love dearly and use with my children. So let's welcome Connor. Hi,
Hello.
Connor. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
Good, thank you. Welcome to The Reason We Learn.
Thank you.
All right. So, questions. I just gave a brief introduction about you. I think probably some of my audience are familiar with you because of Tuttle Twins. But I also want to talk to you today about your work with Libertas. Can you tell us what you are doing with Libertas insofar as education is concerned?
Yeah, so we've been around for about a decade. We're a nonprofit think tank that engages primarily in policy reform on a wide range of topics. Um, on the education side, there's two ways to go about this. First is fundamentally we're educating voters and elected officials about all these issues, and so we have to do a lot of public education of, what's wrong and what a solution is, and why the status quo is inefficient or insufficient. And so there's a lot of education generally that goes into our work to build support for the laws we're trying to change. But then out of all the different issues we work on, we're also focused on, like public education as an area of reform, really a lot of like school choice and trying to empower parents to have options beyond just the local government school in their neighborhood, and making sure that as much as possible, we're introducing market competition into the education process so that through competition, we can have, better outcomes, better products and services rather than this monopolistic, degraded status quo that we have in a lot of ways. And so we work on a lot of policy efforts that are designed to, for example, one law that we got passed this year is called an education sandbox. And what this really means is if you're a teacher in a classroom and you don't want to have to teach all the state standards and the top down mandated whatever, with the consent of, I think it's like 2/3 of the parents in the classroom, you can buck the system and do whatever you want. Say, hey, I have this totally different vision for educating the kids in my classroom. I want to go in this direction. I'd love to experiment or do this unique thing. And you can step away from the regime control of what you're told to do and have the autonomy in your classroom to go experiment and serve kids with your time, talents, and the best way you can. So trying to have some innovation in the classroom, trying to improve the very, I think, substandard results we often see in government schools. So ideas like that, trying to shake things up a little bit.
Are you concerned insofar as school choice initiatives go with potential lack of guardrails protecting the parents from, and the schools for that matter, private schools and other alternative schools, from like government strings being attached where they would have curriculum mandates imposed upon them?
Yes and no. If we're talking about a voucher system, then absolutely yes. This is the old school choice where, pull my kid out of public school, I get 5,000 or 10,000 or whatever, and I put them in a private school. That is very difficult to avoid regulation of or push back against, because the nexus, the point of contact of the money is the school, and they're getting all that money as the direct recipient. So it becomes very easy for a legislator to want to go regulate them because they're getting all the money. The better model, I think, is what's more popular recently, which is education savings accounts, is typically what they're called. And the beauty here is that it really decentralizes the spending of the money. For example, instead of me putting my kid in a private school, maybe I'll get that $5,000 onto a card that I can go swipe at Amazon for curriculum, or at the museum for a field trip, or pay the local tutor, or whatever, whatever, whatever. I have all these different options, and because the money is distributed, I am the point of focus, and not any
Right.
particular curriculum or school. And what this, in the best cases, turn into is just like all of us do right now. When we're filing our taxes, we're claiming all kinds of tax credits, the child tax credit, or hey, I installed this clean air, whatever, like any
Hmm.
tax credit we can get, we're all taking advantage of when we file our taxes. And we're all on kind of the honor system. We claim every credit we want. The only way we're held accountable is not through, oh, child tax credit. Okay, we're going to tell you what formula to use for your baby and what diapers to, like, no, there's no regulations of parenting because we claim
Hmm.
the child tax credit. It's just if we're ever audited, we have to demonstrate that we do in fact have children, and therefore, we're able to claim that tax credit. So too with the education savings account. If you're ever audited under this program, you demonstrate, hey, these were valid expenses, here's my receipts, blah blah blah. But it's just an audit of the money rather than a regulatory imposition on it. So it depends how you structure these programs. I like
Hmm.
structuring it in a way where it really diffuses the spending across many places to really minimize the likelihood that any regulators are going to try and put their hooks in it and control. And
Right.
frankly, at the end of the day, if parents are at all concerned that these types of programs are or might in the future going to regulate curriculum or anything like that, then I mean, they're all opt out. No one's compelling anyone to participate in these programs. And so then you can just homeschool and not take any money, which is what a lot of the homeschoolers are doing right now. So from my vantage point, it just gives more options, more choice, pulls more kids out of the public school system, which I think is a
Hmm.
net positive for society. So I know there's some concerns and conspiracy theories and worries and so forth among a lot of my friends out there in the education movement, but I see it as a total net positive to pursue.
Hmm. I think for my part, my concern is that because it is still going to be run through the middleman of the government deciding how much the allotment is per kid, that you still have to, there's going to still be that infrastructure to go to and get it from them, that it's susceptible to elections, the political realm, in the sense that, the next government you get in, the next legislature you get in, if they want to campaign on accountability for those dollars or attaching something specific to the dollars like equity or who knows what else, that there could be public support. And then I, as a taxpayer, I'm thinking to myself, okay, I homeschool and I'm using things, I use things like Tuttle Twins and I use other stuff, but I don't know that I want to subsidize per se, somebody taking the
Sure.
money and choosing to do things that are contra my rights or whatever, So
Yep.
whereas if it were my money, like we have the FSA right now with healthcare, the money starts with me. Like it
Yep.
actually started in my pocket and I put it in the account pre-tax, and I'm subject to the same audit and the same situation for that, as well as business expenses. I just didn't have to run through the middleman, and that wasn't subject to any kind of election change as far as the amount.
Sure.
That's I think my lingering concern.
Yeah, and the tax credit is a decent model too. The where, hey, rather than, like, for example, in Utah, all of our income taxes go to public education, 100% of them. And
Interesting.
so then it would be cool to say, hey, rather than me pay income taxes, what if I kept that money for my kids' education since I homeschool them,
Right.
rather than me paying to homeschool them and then also paying income taxes, which pay for other families' kids? How about I just keep my income tax money? That's also a great model. One of the challenges with it is there's a lot of families who pay no income taxes because they have so
Mhm.
many kids and so many deductions, or they're lower income. And so, but then those kids are trapped because they're lower income. So they go to the government schools. And so there's no financial incentive to support a family like that to get the
Mhm.
kids out of school and pursue something else. So there's total trade offs here. I don't think any of these systems are compelling anyone to participate. Any families who have concern are right to totally opt out. I would opt out. I would not take any of this money, but I still see it as a positive for families who really don't have other financial opportunities, but still could get their kids out with a bit of financial help. And
Mhm.
sure, maybe in the future there's a speculative potential that things could go crazy and something
Mhm.
would change. But in the here and now, it's like, hey, do you want $5,000 per kid to get him a tutor and pull them out and help them? It's like, well, sure, yeah, I would take that. And
Right.
if the concerns ever materialize, then you can reevaluate and see if you want to change
Yeah.
it up.
Well, I think, one of the things I aspire to do here is to help parents, be educated consumers of education. So whatever they choose to do, they have their child first in their mind, right? Not so much the system or the specific
Hmm.
curriculum, but thinking about the child's needs and also their parental rights. So that's the only reason, I raise it, is just to make sure that we're kind of centered there. And my bottom line is always just keeping homeschool legal. Like
Totally.
I just, that is my bottom line. So whatever else goes on, I'm with you. They're more choice is better than less choice. I just want to make sure that's safeguarded, that there are guardrails
And
around
I think we
homeschooling.
forget that until a few decades ago, homeschooling was illegal. I mean, this is
Right.
kind of a fairly modern trend in terms of the education freedom we now find ourselves having.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was in Germany a couple months ago, and just, I mean, even to this day, homeschooling is illegal. That was the first, if not one of
1939.
the.
It's the same
Yes,
policy.
yeah, the same one that the
Yeah.
Nazis introduced, immediately saying we own the kids and we're gonna, educate them, so called, and so it's a great freedom to have. And like you, I totally want to protect it because I think where families can figure it out and accommodate homeschooling, not they should, they can, it's great. Not all homeschoolers are the same. Not all homeschooling families. I speak at a lot of homeschool conferences, and I always say, like, I think a lot of us are getting it wrong. It's like you're schooling at home, great.
Right.
The walls are different. Your kid may not have to get permission to go to the bathroom anymore, but if you're still replicating a lot of the other problems from the school system, the regimentation, the forced
Yeah.
curriculum and all, this authoritarian approach towards, imparting knowledge from the teacher to the student, like, I think there's so many downsides to the way schools are done that if all we do is replicate them at the home, like, sure, that's marginally better, but you're still missing out a lot if you're not pursuing, I think, a much different strategy of education.
Let's talk about that a bit, because I know you've homeschooled your own kids and you mentioned there are lots of different kinds of homeschoolers. Parents ask me a lot, well, where do I start figuring that out? And I mean, I don't think they're necessarily asking, where do I go to file the paperwork? I think they're saying, how do I even begin to think about not replicating school? What does that even? They're so deep in the paradigm, they don't even know how to do
Totally.
that.
Yeah, especially those of us who went to public school. It's all we know. It's what we grow.
Right.
So I wrote a book a few years ago called Passion-Driven Education. And it's basically an answer to your question. It's, how do I do this? What do I do? How do I inspire my kids to love learning? And then how do I, as the parent, build a curriculum or a educational plan around that? And so to simplify it, in a 30-second answer, it's that we have to honor the individuality of our children. You have to customize education based on what your child's interests are and what their journey is in life. And they don't know it yet. They're figuring out their journey, just like a lot of us still are. Which means we have to be flexible. We have to iterate. We have to pivot. We have to pursue different things. Hey, what are you? I talk in the book about how my son, my oldest, when I wrote the book at the time, he was really big on anger.
Eh, are you frozen? Hello? Uh-oh, is it me? Can you guys see me moving? Is he frozen and it's just me? Oh, there you go. I think you're moving now. All right.
Yep.
You good?
Sorry. Yeah.
That's okay.
Internet snafu.
That's
So
okay.
I didn't sit my son down and say, let's learn science, let's learn algebra, let's learn history. Those are foreign languages to a kid to have to, like, learn all these abstract ideas. No, no, no. I said, let's talk Angry Birds. When you launch the Angry Bird in the air and it comes crashing down, let's talk gravity, force, momentum. Like, I can
Right.
teach my son physics. I'm just helping him better understand something he's already curious about, and he loved it. I did
Mm.
algebra. He was 6 years old, and I was teaching my son algebra, not with X and Y and these abstract variables and what does that mean. I turned
Right.
his Angry Birds into acronyms. I'm like, okay, if you have three, I don't even remember what it was, 3AB plus 2AB, how many AB are there? Five, and like,
Oh,
now we're
wow,
using
that's
very.
awesome. Frozen again. Yeah, I think we're having a little bit of an internet issue, but you guys can see me and hear me, right? You got it? You
Yeah, it
good?
keeps having a little hiccup.
Yeah.
Um, so, teaching him video game development and e-commerce. We bought the game online. Who did,
Still frozen. Uh-oh. Well,
makes the someone doesn't want us talking. That's what's going
I
on
know,
here, right?
right? I wonder who that
Uh,
could be.
so anyways, the point is that it helped him learn so much about all kinds of topics because I
Mhm,
honored his interests and I
mhm.
paid attention to them and how I taught him. So that's kind of the approach of passion driven education, is helping your children develop an interest around what they enjoy and kind of using that as a model for how to build out an educational process and journey for them.
That's awesome. And, you have well, I mentioned at the outset the Tuttle Twins, and you created that a long time ago, really. I mean, by today's standards, with people just now starting to create new alternatives to curriculum and books for kids and so forth. I know because I used them with my kids when they were younger and homeschooling, and they absolutely loved this pencil story. Like that was their
Mm,
favorite thing, just to even get down deep into like where the pencil comes from. But also, I think it lasted. In other words, the way the stories tell or the way the books tell the stories really sticks with the kids. You don't
mm.
have to teach econ 101 to, to illustrate these points. So, how did you get the idea? Where did that come from to do these books?
S- So yeah, we started in 2014, and it's because I was running this think tank and found myself wanting to share with my children what the heck dad does, all day for work. So I went on Amazon one day and I was looking for books that would help me talk to my kids about, free markets or property rights or
Right.
whatever, and there was nothing. I mean,
Yeah.
which was silly because there's books on like birds and the bees and potty training and like any kids book you want, you can find a book for that issue other than like libertarian conservative freedom type issues. And so
Right.
I spent a couple of weeks like, oh, I wish there was something like that. I'm like, hey idiot, you talk about entrepreneurship all the time, like maybe here's an idea that you can pursue. And I was talking with a buddy of mine who's our illustrator and my partner Elijah, and so he wanted this idea too. He's like, we ought to do something, so we started figuring out what that could look like. And at the time, there was no vision for it. There was like no clue that it would become what it has today. It was just like, let's do a book and we'll teach our kids, and maybe some people will buy it. And then a lot of people bought it and said, when are you doing the next book? And we're like, all right, yeah, next book, we'll do that. And just it kind of slowly built from there. 2020, it exploded with all the COVID, everything. So many families homeschooling, wanting resources, so it just really took off for us in 2020, silver lining to a very dark cloud. And
Yeah.
we haven't looked back since. Now we got a cartoon show, a podcast, a game, curriculum. We're talking about doing an annual event now. Like it's just growing, and it's a lot of fun.
So it's kind of like the wild kratts of civics
Yeah.
and economics. For those who don't know what wild kratts is, it's another kid's favorite about wildlife and so forth. Um, Now, you just came out with the U.S. history curriculum, the book, and then you've got PDFs and also I think videos or something to back it up. And you just had the launch. I imagine that's going very well, also, right? Because there's a big need for U.S. history curriculum that is, as they say, unwoke, or it's hasn't been
Yeah,
zinified.
yeah, it's going really well. I think in large measure because there is a very clear recognition among a lot of families that there's a problem with the way we teach history. Certainly with critical race theory and 1619 project and some of these things, a lot of parents are like, "Oh my gosh, why are they trying to call all the founding fathers white supremacists and bigots and tearing down their statues and all that kind of stuff." And so there's a lot of understanding that that's a problem, and where parents struggle then is like, okay, well, what do I do about that? Like, I can see a problem. I don't know what the solution is. And so now we've been able to say, like, hey, here's this book and curriculum and do all this and you'll be fine.
Mhm.
Um, it's been a long time coming for us. It's 2.5 years almost that we've been working on this because for us, like the real thing that we've been trying to figure out is it's one thing to teach what happened. It's another thing to explain and help kids understand why it happened.
Right.
But beyond why it happened, which is critical, even more important than why it happened back then, it's the question of how it matters to our lives today. So we
Right.
go from like the superficial what happened to the more contextual why it happened to the current and relatable and contextual how it matters to us today. And no other history book talks about this. They don't even attempt to explain like here's how you can learn from the past to apply it to your life today. They don't even attempt it. that's like the unique value proposition of our book, is really saying like, here's why this is relevant today. Here's modern situations where maybe the same ideas are being discussed, or where you can think to apply them.
Hmm.
So that was the exciting thing for us, is like, there's tons of history books out there, but we wanted a unique one that we talk about this quote all the time: those who don't learn from the past are doomed to repeat it.
Right.
But like, no history books out there teach kids to learn from the past. They just teach them about the past. It's like we're going
Right.
through a museum of American history. It's like, look, they used to shoot out of muskets like that, and they used to wear a uniform. Like, these interesting things, but ultimately not relevant to like our lives today, and they don't
Right.
influence us. And that's just the wrong way to teach history. History is about framing our past to determine our future. Like, for example, I was bullied a lot in school. I was a late bloomer. I was picked on a lot. I could frame my past as, I'm a victim. I was bullied. Shame on them. The the mistakes and failures in life I can attribute back to those jerks who set me off on a wrong path. Or I can frame the past as, they were probably being like abused at home by their parents and taking it out on me because they didn't know what to do. And I can have compassion now for the little guy because I understand what it was like to be a little guy back then. And so, like, how I frame my past is how I see and pursue my future. That's
Hmm.
what's completely missing in our history education, is talking about framing the past to empower us to make better decisions today. These other social studies books, I have a stack over here on my desk of all the kind of the big books used in schools. They're great for teaching superficial factoids. They're horrible for teaching context of like why this stuff matters to our lives today. That's the goal behind our new Tuttle
Hmm.
Twins history book.
Well, and then I think there are parents who are specifically looking for a more positive framing because, not that they want to sugarcoat history per se, but what they're seeing is, you have the factoid books, but now there's also a focus on things like, the 1619 project and a BLM curriculum where the framing is 100% negative. So it's kind of like, let's only look at the clay feet. And then let's make them, so clay covered we can never wash them off. It's just it's it's pervasive, perpetual to the point where the whole country is invalid and illegitimate, and we got to tear it down and start over. And I've noticed a lot of parents feel caught in the middle because they are saying, I don't necessarily want the, rah, rah, America's perfect history book. I want real, I want to tell the story, but I also want to focus, as you said, I want to frame it in such a way that we make better decisions for the future. And we look at the positive, we look at what we have that's good. And remember, it was supposed to be to make a more perfect union, not that we were perfect the day that the country was founded. And as oxymoronic as it sort of seems to say, more perfect, it just it says we're trying to do better every day. And a lot of parents feel stuck, like there isn't anything for that. Do you feel like what you're offering covers that or frames it in that way, that it's
Oh yeah, no, we have a lot
comprehensive
of,
but
yeah. We made sure to include a lot of nuance. I mean, you're covering something like slavery. You got to make sure that you're explain. You could go to the polar extremes and like the 1619 project and others, or you could say like, look, here is Thomas Jefferson, who yes inherited a bunch of slaves, and yes was in a dynamic in which slavery was part of their kind of family economy and dynamic. But at the same time, he was privately writing that it was a moral evil, and he was theorizing about how it could be. Like, who else was doing that? Like,
right.
some of these guys were ahead of their time and trying to figure out a way to pull themselves out of the system that had been going on and justify legally and morally and religiously, for a long time.
Since time
So,
immemorial.
right, and still today.
Yeah.
So the nuance is important, and at the end of the day, I'll say what we're really trying to accomplish is not to teach kids. A lot of people think the Tuttle Twins are children's books. Sure, they're children's books, but what we're really after is having like fostering family discussions. So the real magic of our book comes when mom or dad is reading with their kids, and we've got discussion questions and prompts and all these types of things to say like, well, what do you think about this? Like, here's Connor's take on it. Great, but how do you think that this really plays out in our world, or how
Mhm.
does this land with your own kind of view of things? And so the real magic that we hear of from families is when they're like, my gosh, I was sitting at dinner and my kid brings up this thing you read in the book, and now we're talking about complex economic ideas with my 8-year-old, and
Right,
never
right.
imagined having a conversation like this. And so uh, I'm not here to like directly teach kids and say you will learn all these things the way I envision. we're here to prompt families to explore these ideas together and then go off on their own on YouTube or Wikipedia or whatever and start looking into this stuff more. It's really just to spark those curiosities and conversations, and that's where we see the magic happening.
Great. And now that you are a successful ed entrepreneur, so or edupreneur, as they might say, what were the lessons that you learned from? You said you weren't expecting it to take off like it did, but it did. And now looking at the landscape, I know there are a lot of people out there who want to do similar things, not literally like make Tuttle Twins books, but they're saying, I have something to offer. I want to, I have that idea for how to make education better, or I think I do. What kind of advice do you have for entrepreneurs who want to really try to make learning a better experience for kids, whether inside or outside the classroom? Kind of doesn't matter. What do you advise?
Great question. So what comes to mind first, there's a lot of ways to go down a fun rabbit hole like this, but I'll say this, like my wife was reminding me last year, we were talking about this, that I had like 10 or 12 failed little business ventures. So some of them were ed focused, some of them, but like I was poking a lot of things, trying to figure out what my path in life was, where I could find a product market fit, where something was actually going to grow and take off. And to me, as I reflect on that, the journey is just as important as the destination. I learned a lot in those early years and failed efforts that serves me now, that I'm able to incorporate into what I'm doing. And so I think for any entrepreneur, like it can be very frustrating sometimes because you've got these lofty ideas of, what you envision and what you want to do, and it's not taking off as quick as you would want. And why is this going slow? And it's a slog because you're out there, you're wearing like 18 hats and doing all the things and really trying to push. And so I just think, failure needs to be perceived as part of the process and a very important part of the process, something to even be embraced and to make sure we're learning from that, because we all will fail, where it's going to take, a few iterations or pivots to figure out, how to refine your product or go into a totally different vertical instead. And it's just become such an important part of my own story and getting to where we are. It's hard, right? People are like, oh my gosh, you've sold 4 million books and blah, blah, blah. You have a cartoon. Like, yes, we do. Great. But like, can I tell you about the early days? Do you
Yeah.
want to know what it was like to get here? It's one thing to see the end result. It's another thing to, and I don't think Elon Musk had this quote, or at least someone attributed it to him, where he says, like, when a woman gets pregnant, we throw her a baby shower and support her and, and have all these resources, and we're there for her. Why don't we have business showers, right? An entrepreneur starts and, hey, I started a new business. Hey, I'll be there. I can mentor you. I've got financing, or I've got a network, or I've got a, and so I don't know, like for me, it's just it's a fun journey. It's an arduous journey. But I will say this for the ed space specifically, I think in the next 10 years, we're going to see a radical explosion of innovation within the education space. We primed the pump with COVID, the pandemic pods and all the like. There was all of a sudden this like, oh, we're all homeschoolers now. Okay. And what are we going to do? And we saw this explosion of creativity and people figuring out like, hey, let's go in with 5 other families and hire a tutor, and then the teachers were like, well, wait a minute, I can quit my job and all the regulations and the bureaucracy, and I can make
Right.
more money starting my own little like micro school, and
And
a
have
lot of
more
innovation like that.
autonomy. Right.
Totally.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that really accelerated a trend we're going to see a lot more of, especially coupled with technology and online tools, things like OutSchool, which we use for our family, a lot of stuff like this. I'm really excited about the next decade for kind of educational entrepreneurship and innovation. I think a lot of creators out there are now seeing that there's demand for this type of alternative education, that it has mainstreamed a bit, that it's not weird to be a homeschooler.
Mm-hmm.
Homeschooling tripled. There's a market for it, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm very optimistic, and I think it's a great time to get in on educational,
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurial type of stuff because the market is growing fast.
Right. And what's interesting, as I sort of hinted at before, is that, the market has grown across the board. So, it's tempting to think that most of the people dissatisfied with school are people who might align with like the liberty movement, or might align with more, conservative worldview, or like a worldview that isn't what we said, like I said, woke. But there's an equal number of people who are dissatisfied with the academics or the schooling, who want more of that. It's like they don't,
True.
they want more of that stuff. And so there are products and there are services that are cropping up. I've seen them myself in the homeschool community. And so what I'm curious about is, have you, first of all, you work with animators, you work with creators. Have you personally had any difficulty creating the products that you create, finding the talent, the creative talent, which is very often left of center, to produce your work? Or have you always had a steady supply of people who are in the creative space who are either okay doing whatever work it is, or they're philosophically aligned? And what do you what do you advise to parents who want to pick and choose based on their worldview? I mean,
Yeah, great questions.
parenting, right?
So, to the first question, you're always struggling to find like good people for any role, but no, I don't think we've struggled to find ideologically aligned people. If anything, there are a lot of like-minded creators out there who struggle to work in a corporate, bureaucratic something or other, or who are working in, an institution that's gone woke, or getting dominated by the left, and they want out. They want to find passion projects. They want to do things with meaning. So if anything, like I was in Amsterdam, and I a couple months ago, and sitting in the airport, this guy walks up. He's like, "Tuttle Twins." I was like, "Yeah, you're
Oh my
Connor."
God,
Yeah,
in
and
Amsterdam. That's wild.
yeah, and he says, "I'm a musician, and I love the cartoon, and I would love to help create music for the cartoon. Here's my card." I'm like, "All right, I'll pass this on to the team and see if anything comes of it." But the point is, like, there are hungry people out there who want their creative juices to be applied towards meaningful projects that they align with. And as the world polarizes and we get, all the
Yeah.
woke, weird stuff, whatever, I think there's a lot of kind of right of center, freedom minded people who are really seeking opportunities to apply their talents towards something that they align with. So we haven't really struggled, I think, too much. And perhaps won't in the future as things polarize more, that a lot of those people will continue fleeing corporate America and their leftist overlords to look for these entrepreneurial type of endeavors. The Remind me your second question.
The second one was for parents. So, I
Mm,
know, for example, I can find content that I would align with your products, okay? And there are other brands and there are other places I could go, but I've also spent a lot of years like looking into this. There are
yep.
parents who are sort of new to homeschooling or they're planning to homeschool, and they're sort of like, how do I vet that this is, first of all, accurate information, that it is, not going to give my kids a worldview I don't agree with. Now, my initial answer to them is go slowly, don't buy a box of stuff, kind of plan to iterate, like you said at the outset. But I wonder if you have any other tips for how to find things that align with what you want for your kids.
Yeah, this is a tough thing, because as humans, our brains actually, they want to conserve calories. Our brains are always looking for opportunities to reduce, mental burden, and one of those ways is shortcuts. We are a very peer influenced people, because the human brain is looking after what other people are doing as a signal for what we ought to do as well. Because hey, if they've done the thinking already, maybe I don't need to. So I can just. It's why when we go to an Amazon listing, we look at the rating. And, oh, okay, well,
Yep.
10,000 reviews, 5 stars, it
Guilty.
should be fine. Yeah, and we all are. It's literally our brains are saying, dude, don't take 2 hours to review this. You don't want to do that. Just go with the shortcut. And so social proof, as it's called, is a very powerful tool that can be used for good to get us information in a very quick manner, but can also be manipulated by people who know that if I just create, hey, 9 out of 10 doctors agree that smoking is totally healthy, and all of a sudden you're going down that path just because
Right.
you listen to the social proof. So
Right.
to get to your question, right, I think social proof can be very helpful here, because there's a lot of veteran homeschoolers, there's online reviewers, there's YouTube people that, like, they'll show you, rather than you buy the thing and take an hour, they can show you in 10 minutes, here's my experience with it. And then you can evaluate more quickly, like, is that a thing or not? I think fundamentally what is required, though, is an investment of time and energy by the parent. What I have seen in a lot of homeschooler communities is they're looking for a shortcut, but like a shortcut of shortcuts. They just want to know what's the approved curriculum, or what's the off the shelf solution, or what should I do? Just give it to me so I can get going and move on with my life. I think that's to the detriment of the kids. I think that's anathema to why you decided to homeschool, to like then just have another authoritarian thing where someone tells you what to do and then you just go do it. It's like, take a little bit of time, do a little research. You're going to have to
Right.
invest that. And from there, it's a very decentralized thing. Maybe you're going to watch YouTube reviews. Maybe, Connor has a recommended reading list to do with your kids. The Good and the Beautiful certainly has a, big, long recommended reading list. And so you can find these shortcuts. And like for our kids, it's just been cobbled together from a variety of sources. And maybe that's more just my personality and our style. But when people ask me for recommendations, I typically I resist, because I'm like, well, my worldview might be a little bit different than yours, and I don't want you to be upset with me based on this, or I don't want you to take what I say as gospel and just say, go buy all the things Connor bought. I think you ought to be investing a little bit of time, whoever I'm talking to like, going and poking around. I can give you a few ideas, but like, go poke around and, explore. So that's typically the way I like to answer is I just think everyone needs to invest the time to figure out what fits and works for them. It is a challenge because you can get burned. There are people out there who we trust. We're implicitly trusting people, and then we find out that they were self-serving, or they were an affiliate and they were just recommending things that they were getting paid for, and not necessarily
Right.
and so I don't know. But it's the wild, wild west, which I think, if you think back to that time in America, that was like total freedom, man. Like,
Right.
go explore and put your imprint on the world and plant your flag. And like, that to me is the exciting thing for entrepreneurs and families of who value freedom, to like embrace that aspect of the abundance of options that we have and just go start experimenting.
Well, I think back to what you said earlier too about, embrace failure. I think you can set a great example for your kids too in the process
Mm,
of homeschooling. If you're doing it together, if it's a joint like a joint effort, in that, as you said, you don't necessarily go buy a box and let some other, box curriculum be the authority, but you try something. And if it doesn't work for the child, doesn't work for the lifestyle, the family, whatever the budget ongoing, that's a learning opportunity in itself for your children.
totally.
And I think an opportunity to show them how much you care about them and how much you want their education to work for them, that you might say, you know what? And this happened to me. We're like partway through a book and it was just kind of not working. And I just said, you know what? Let's do something different. I don't think we tried, but this wasn't the very best choice. Let's go find something different. And then I was able to take what I learned from that particular it didn't work situation to pick something better, and they were that much happier with the thing we chose next because they were
Mm.
part of the whole process of iteration. So that's pretty much the advice that I give people is just plan that things are not going to be minute race perfect from the get-go, and you might have to make some changes. So don't invest tons of money day one, and take your time and let each of these tries, these attempts be a lesson in and of itself, because then you
I
get
love it.
feedback from your child too. What'd you think of this lesson? Did you enjoy it? Was it good? Do you like the format? Blah blah blah. And I don't know, that's kind of my takeaway. I was just wondering if you had any other thoughts, but it sounds similar.
No, it is similar. And I just to add on to what you're saying, I feel like it's empowering for the kids to see their parents more responsive to figuring it out as they go. What I mean by that is I remember when I was young, I had this idea, and I think a lot of young people do, that like our parents are know-it-alls, or that adults got it all figured out, or
Yeah.
that they know everything already. And that was very intimidating, because it's like, my gosh, there's so much to learn, and how am I ever gonna know all the right things? And so when I speak to youth groups, one of the presentations that I do, the central message is, we have no idea what we're doing. Like, we
Right.
adults are figuring it out every day, and don't be like, just, you got to get in problem solving mode, because that's the rest of your life. And we adults like to project confidence. Especially to our kids, we like to project that we're the authority figures and we know what we're doing. And so the flip side of that, to what you're saying, I think it's a very humbling and bonding thing for kids to see their parents learning alongside them,
Mhm.
admitting, like, I don't know what the answer to that is. Let's go figure it out together. And now they're alongside mom or dad who's Googling something or looking it up, and they're learning, oh, when my mom doesn't know something, here's how she does it. I can do that too. I don't need to learn all the things and become perfect in my knowledge of everything. I just need to know how to be a problem solver, or I need to
Right.
know how to find information. I think that's far better parenting in an education context than it is to just like, oh, when my kids aren't looking, I'll go study it so that I can, show them that I know everything. I think that actually sets kids up for failure. I think we need to invite them alongside us as we figure it out so they can see we don't know everything, but when we need knowledge, here's how we go get it.
Well, and that's the beginning of wisdom too, isn't it? I mean, there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. And wisdom, I like to think of as knowing how much you don't know still. It's kind of like you know enough to know how little you know, and you're humbled by that, and yet you're still curious. So it's kind of like a mishmash, but that's what we have as adults, or ought to have as adults, to pass to our children is, you know what, I don't know everything, but I know that I don't know everything. And that's what I've gained by living this many years and having these experiences is, the wisdom, the maturity and all that, to be able to comfortably say that to you, which is something I think kids come to a little more slowly.
Yeah.
And being able to model that is a lesson in, character and wisdom in and of itself. Now, I know you have a hard stop at 45, so I want to try to wrap up. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like for people in the audience to know? My audience are primarily parents. There are some educators out there. There are people who are just really keen to see education improved in America, but they don't quite know how. They have a vague idea of what the problems are, and I think that some people are really scared, honestly.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
So I'm trying to focus on, it's really bad, but we have this golden opportunity. Like I'm trying to go that way. Is there anything else you'd want to add to that?
Yeah, I think because there's so many people like that, there's a great opportunity for leadership. What I mean by that is so often what families will say, and especially the moms, when I'm out doing the homeschool conference, it's 90% moms, and they will feel like I don't know how to save the world. I don't know how to fight these big politicians and battles and things. All I know is how to teach my kids. So I'm going to focus on my family. And to that I say, that's awesome, because collectively in the aggregate, that's how we save our country, is by more parents being super intentional about talking to their kids about these ideas and, having these family dinner discussions and everything. So good on you. Great job. However, you need to make sure that the influence of what you're doing with your family can be recognized and shared beyond your family. So this gets to the leadership point, starting a podcast, starting a book club, starting a mom's group, do an online support group, do a weekly call, become a coach, get a coach, create a, email listserv. I don't know, but extend your influence and just say like, hey, I don't have it all figured out, but I'd love to create a space where a few of us moms, for example, can come together and just talk about what's working and what's not working. And, Matt Ridley, this kind of scientist and author and whatnot, he has this idea of when ideas have sex with one another, the procreation of ideas. When people get together, and it's like evolutionary biology, you got this species with this trait and this one here, and now they have offspring and there's a new trait. It's like when you gather with people, when you share your ideas, things are going to come from that. You're going to, go start a nonprofit and do this, or you're going to go start this service project, or, just, yes, focus on your family, but know that there are other moms, mostly, right, out there like you, who are scared, who don't know what they're doing. And if you took just a tiny bit of initiative and leadership to invite and gather and coordinate and whatever, they'll just, suck that up and really latch on to that. And now you've extended your influence in just a small way. And who knows what's going to come of that. And it's all incremental. People look at me and I'm out there, 4 million books, whatever. And an aspiring author is like, I could never do so. And I'm like, I didn't. Like, I started with one little book, and it's all incremental. Be patient, recognize that the joy is in the journey, not the destination. You don't have to sell 1 million books. You don't have to change a bunch of laws. You don't have to, right. But take some steps down that path of the journey. Don't focus just on your family. Find ways to say, hey, as we're experimenting with this curriculum, we'd love to, start a YouTube channel where you talk about your failures and stumbles and successes. And you'll see the comments start to pour in where it's like, thank you so much. There's no one in my community like this who, is doing this. It's so great. Like, when you stand up and offer your experience and share your testimony and talk about what you're doing, you're going to impact a lot of people. And that is going to be the compounding effect that's going to do a lot of good. So yes, focus on your family. Totally get it. But find those minimal ways to share with others around you, create community. And if we all do that, the social fabric is going to be very tightly woven, very strong, and things are going to get a lot better for all of us.
Well, I love that. That's a great way to finish this conversation. And I thank you so, so much for your time, everybody. Connor Boyack, you can find him at Libertas. You can also check out the Tuttle Twins website and check out the new history curriculum, the Tuttle Twins books, if you're not familiar with them. Anything else you'd like us to know or places that we should follow you?
No, yeah, TuttleTwins.com is where we got everything. So
Okay,
go check it
great.
out.
All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great afternoon.